To my astonishment, Ishmael picked up a wand from his pile and waved it at me in an enthusiastic gesture of approval. Once again, that was excellent, he said, neatly biting off its leafy head. But you realize, of course, that if you'd been telling this part of the story 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, you would have spoken only of the paradise to come. The idea that man's conquest of the world could be anything but beneficial would have been unthinkable to you. Until the last 3 or 4 decades, the people of your culture had no doubt that things were just going to go on getting better and better and better forever. There was no conceivable end in sight. Yes, that's so. There is, however, one element of the story that you've left out, and we need it to complete your culture's explanation of how things came to be this way. What element is that? I think you can figure it out. So far, we have this much. The world was made for man to conquer and rule, and under human rule it was meant to become a paradise. This clearly has to be followed by a but. It has always been followed by a but. This is because the takers have always perceived that the world was far short of the paradise it was meant to be. True. Let me see. How's this? The world was made for man to conquer and rule, but his conquest turned out to be more destructive than was anticipated? You're not listening. The but was part of the story long before your conquest became globally destructive. The but was there to explain all the flaws in your paradise. Warfare and brutality and poverty and injustice and corruption and tyranny. It's still there today to explain famine and oppression and nuclear proliferation and pollution. It explained World War II. And if it has to, it'll explain World War III. I looked at him blankly. This is a commonplace. Any third grader could supply it. I'm sure you're right, but I don't see it yet. Come, think. What went wrong here? What has always gone wrong here? Under human rule, the world should have become a paradise, but people screwed it up? Of course. And why did they screw it up? Why? Did they screw it up because they didn't want a paradise? No. The way it's seen is they were bound to screw it up. They wanted to turn the world into a paradise, but being human, they were bound to screw it up. But why? Why, being human, were they bound to screw it up? It's because there's something fundamentally wrong with humans. Something that definitely works against paradise. Something that makes people stupid and destructive and greedy and short-sighted. Of course, everyone in your culture knows this. Man was born to turn the world into a paradise. But tragically, he was born flawed. And so his paradise has always been spoiled by stupidity, greed, destructiveness, and short-sightedness. That's right. Having second thoughts, I gave him a long, incredulous stare. Are you suggesting that this explanation is false? Ishmael shook his head. It's pointless to argue with mythology. Once upon a time, the people of your culture believed that man's home was the center of the universe. Man was the reason the universe had been created in the first place, so it made sense that his home should be its capital. The followers of Copernicus didn't argue with this. They didn't point at people and say, "You're wrong." They pointed at the heavens and said, "Look at what's actually there." I'm not sure what you're getting at. How did the takers come to the conclusion that there's something fundamentally wrong with humans? What evidence were they looking at? I don't know. I think you're being purposely dense. They were looking at the evidence of human history. True. And when did human history begin? Well, 3 million years ago. Ishmael gave me a disgusted look. Those 3 million years were only very recently tacked onto human history, as you very well know. Before that, it was universally assumed that human history began when? Well, just a few thousand years ago. Of course. In fact, among the people of your culture, it was assumed that the whole of human history was your history. No one had the slightest suspicion that human life extended beyond your reign. That's so. So, when the people of your culture concluded that there's something fundamentally wrong with humans, what evidence were they looking at? They were looking at the evidence of their own history. Exactly. They were looking at 0.5% of the evidence taken from a single culture. not a reasonable sample on which to base such a sweeping conclusion. No. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with people. Given a story to enact that puts them in accord with the world, they will live in accord with the world. But given a story to enact that puts them at odds with the world, as yours does, they will live at odds with the world. Given a story to enact in which they are the lords of the world, they will act like lords of the world. And given a story to enact in which the world is a foe to be conquered, they will conquer it like a foe, and one day, inevitably, their foe will lie bleeding to death at their feet, as the world is now.